Hey guys, and welcome back to the Pack and Clint show here on Total Coverage Sports. I'm Pack, that's Clint. Super excited for you guys to join us here. We're sorry about the fact that we missed the past 2 weeks. Been busy with travel and some of that stuff. I know everyone assumes the summer is when football has nothing going on, but trust me, that's just not true. Clint's been meeting with some people. I've been going to some places and meeting with some people, so you kind of get busy during this time, and that's what happened with the both of us. But we're gonna try to commit to, every Tuesday or Thursday, we're gonna have an episode, and until about the start of August, we'll break down two teams a week in the SEC. We'll go through, their offense, their defense, and then we'll talk about our predictions, and then starting from about the second week of August, we're going to start moving into the other conferences. So we'll spend some time in the Big Ten, we'll spend some time in the ACC, and then we'll spend some time in the Group of Five. And then after that, that last week, the one basically the week 0 week, we'll talk about our playoff predictions, who are the 12 teams we think are going to end up being in the playoff, who we think is going to be in what seed. We'll give you guys our playoff predictions, and then we'll break down some of the awards that are really big. So we're talking about the Heisman, the Blitnikoff, the Nagurski. We'll talk about all that different stuff in that last week. So that's just kind of an overview of what the next 6 weeks leading up to the season are going to look like. And then during the season, it will be just like last year. We'll give you guys breakdowns of games. We'll preview them based off of the film that we've watched. We'll recap the games, talking about again from the film that we watch. And anytime we can, if we're able to, we will show you guys film. Otherwise, I highly recommend. I'll always be posting what I talk about on my page. I'm sure during the season, Clint will as well. So anytime that we say anything and we talk about a player, we talk about a concept, go to our page. You'll probably find it there. So that's just kind of a very high level overview of what's going to go on in terms of what we're doing here. So um, there's not much else. Clint, if you're ready to go, we can start with this Auburn offense and then go from there.
Yeah. So for this Auburn offense, you have Golish coming over from South Florida with his offensive coordinator Joel Gordon, who he's going to be calling the plays again like he did last year. The offense, just a brief little breakdown of it. It says multiple on the our lads, but it really is a veer and shoot with how they run it. Uh, a couple of key factors of the offense. You're going to have high tempo the whole entire time. Most of his plays, whenever he's running his offense, Joel Gordon's going to have the ball snap between 15 to 20 seconds on the play clock, which its goal with that is just to exhaust the defense and prevent them from being able to substitute based on personnel or the type of players that they have in. Second off, you're going to have wide splits with any veer and shoot. Uh, Pretty much just like what we did with when we talked about Mississippi State's offense a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be very spread out through the whole field, kind of like an air raid to a sense, but it's not. It's not an air raid. It's the same principles, but it's a different type of offense essentially. Goal with that is just to empty the box, which not only allows you to spread the field out throughout the entire 50 yards, but also it allows on run plays for the running back to have more of an opportunity to break for an explosive. Because with these offenses, a lot of them they're going to be running a lot of ISO, a lot of inside zone, some gap stuff like that. Uh, Going off the run, they're a run first team. Even though they're spread and they spread the field out a lot, Golish throughout his whole career, his offenses have been based heavily with physical rushing attack. A lot of what they'll use a lot of gap concepts. They'll implement fullbacks a lot of the time and run a lot of misdirection too. So you're not going to be seeing too much zone. You'll see a lot of gap though. Uh, a lot of their offense is predicated based on choice routes and RPOs. Choice route is essentially where, based on how a defense is lining up and how they're running their defense, a wide receiver has an option to, for example, you could have uh, a choice route where the receiver can either go on a post or go on a fade, depending on how the corner is playing in coverage. And then the final one will be uh, the quarterback involvement that he's going to have in his offense, his scheme. It's going to require a quarterback who has a really good ability to read a defense and can process quickly, especially with all the choice routes and RPOs that are going to be going on, and especially with the choice, because with the choice routes, you have to be really in tune with your receivers, and you and your receiver both have to have a really good ability to read a defense and be able to process quickly on what should be going on. So just with that alone, you're going to need a quarterback that is very intelligent. And also with what we've seen with Byron Brown, for example, which we'll get into the players on that offense, Joel Gordon's going to want a quarterback who can run the ball, whether it's on options, QB ISOs, or midlines. Where Gordon comes from, this will make sense. He comes from the Tom Manning tree, which, if you watched any of Iowa State from 2016 to 2020, 2021, around that time, a lot of it was Brock Purdy, but you also had other guys in there where all those quarterbacks, they had an ability to run, and they were used a lot in the run game at times. So that's going to be something that not only he was under at Iowa State, but something that he's brought to South Florida with Byron Brown. Um, so I don't think necessarily that's going to be just a QB based thing. I think a lot of it is just based on that's going to be the type of quarterbacks they recruit, is going to be guys who have an ability to run, but not going to be asked to be run first quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think you nailed a lot of that. I'll add in a few things. You mentioned with the veer and shoot, right? They're going to get into really wide splits and they're going to try to run the ball. Really, if you're trying to distill it down to like one sentence and you're not that super football savvy, really it's just a numbers game for them. If they've got less, if like think about it this way, if there is four receivers that are basically on the sideline, that means that with a standard offensive line, right, that means that there's six gaps. There's two gaps outside the tackles, there's two gaps outside the guards, and then there's two interior gaps with the center. So there's six gaps, and when you're bringing out four guys in the box, what you're really doing is you're saying to the defense, are you going to put six guys in the run in terms of in the box? Well, if you do that, then to one side you're going to have the same amount of guys as they have receivers, right? You can't have six guys in the box and then have three guys to both sides. So if you put six guys in the box, then they'll pass it because they have better numbers there. If you have less than six guys in the box, well, now they're a gap ahead of you in terms of the run game. So now they're going to want to run it. So Clint did a really good job of actually explaining some of the concepts that the wide choice is built around. But if you are just looking for like a one sentence overview, it's a numbers game, really. And then you mentioned it with the offense and Tom Manning and Gordon. It's a really good point because Byron Brown has been trending on Twitter for a little bit of an awkward throwing motion. It's not the most clean, looks a little painful at times, but the running aspect of him is really, really important and something that really can't be undersold because he is 6'4", something like that. He looks like he's about 235, 240 pounds, and he's really, really hard to tackle. And when you have that, that does really, really change some of the run game stuff where now you've got to add an extra gap because of the quarterback. Well, now it's really hard to play split safety because now you're going to be two gaps short. And so I think that's a really, really big component, especially for an offense that, like Clint said, is wants to run the ball first. That's really the main difference between some of the air raid guys and some of the veer and shoot or run and gun guys is, they do want to run the ball first. That is their first priority. So that's something to really pay attention for is, Byron Brown is going to be a hard person to play against, especially if you are a team that, does want to play light boxes, because what a light box is now a really light box. And so that's a few things to keep in mind there. And then, I think the other thing to point out with this offense is you look at their roster, and that is a lot of yellow or orange, whatever color you want to call that. They're going to have a lot of transfers that start. A lot of those guys are people that, that Golish took from South Florida. So there is some carryover, there is some continuity, there is some level of, guys that are in the system. But again, it's a lot of new guys that haven't seen a lot of SEC play, and that can there can be an adjustment period for that, because a lot of SEC defenses have already seen the veer and shoot with Josh Heupel and with Jeff Levy, so that there is some level of like, we kind of know what you're going to run, whereas Auburn's not going to maybe have that as much to their benefit.
Yeah, just to cover what you said, which is the biggest thing that you can see on here is that you have a lot of orange, and you're right. A lot of these guys are from South Florida. Obviously, a Byron Brown from South Florida. Uh, Even though you have Jeremiah Cobb returning from Auburn, who was their leading rusher last year. You also have South Florida's leading rusher with Bryson Washington coming over to Auburn too, who I believe was around how many yards was he? He rushed for about. Oh, never
It
mind.
was it
He
was
didn't
a
come from
lot.
South Florida.
I'll find the exact number, but it was
He,
not a
he didn't come.
small.
He didn't come from South Florida. He came from Baylor. He was about 788 yards in the rush game. But all three of the starting receivers that's projected right now are from South Florida. You have Jeremiah Coger. You have who I believe was their leading. No, Keyshawn Singleton was their leading receiver. Jeremiah Coger was second, and then you have Chaz Nimrod in, who was their fourth leading receiver, and you even have Christian Neptune, who was one of their top receivers too. So on the
Mhm.
O line, you have Cole Best, Cole Skinner. Both of those guys are from South Florida. So it's going to be a lot of guys who are going to have to adapt from playing American football all year long to playing in the SEC against a much tougher D line than they're used to, a much tougher uh, probably defensive scheme than they're used to. So it's going to be a lot of adapting and a lot of being able to see how they do against the higher level competition. Um, Other notes I want to point out is you'll see two tight ends right there, even though they're rarely going to line up in like a base 12 personnel where you have two tight ends on the line. They will run a lot of different plays where they'll have two tight ends line up as receivers.
Mhm.
Um, you'll have a good amount of them where they'll have, for example, they'll have one tight end line up farthest to the sideline. They'll have another one line up in a slot. So you'll see a lot of different looks from either Jonathan Eccles or Jake Johnson, who was at North Carolina last year. A lot of people know his brother, Max Johnson, who was a quarterback at LSU, A&M, North Carolina. So you have some decent experience here. You see a lot of their years. A lot of them are either juniors or seniors. But like I said, and I've kind of just been beating the dead horse at this point, is just that it's going to be interesting to see how they hold up against an SEC defense rather than playing UAB, Memphis, Navy, Rice, those type of teams.
Yeah, I'm with you there. We can move on to the defense now. So this is going to be DJ Durkin's unit. Last year, that was one of the best defenses in the country. They're going to return a considerable amount. They return Xavier Atkins, who is probably one of the three best linebackers in the SEC. They bring back Jared Smith, who, as a freshman, had some really good moments. Melendez had some really good moments as a freshman. Rayshon Pleasant was up and down, but anytime you can bring back someone, that's a good sign. Caleb Harris played some last year. Eric Winters had some moments as a freshman. Now, the one thing I will say for them is they do lose both of the corners that started for them last year. Rayshon Pleasant was actually their nickel for a lot of last year. It was Caden Lee and Jay Crawford who started most of the games at cornerback for them. They're both gone. One of them is at Tennessee, and the other is now at Ole Miss. So there is going to be some loss there. And then some of those guys behind them, Jacoby Matthews, he's been around for a while. I think he was at A&M and M and then LSU. He was part of that. I think he was a part of that five-star class in 2022. Um, and then, they're going to be pretty deep at linebacker, I'd say. Demarcus Riddle is a good player. You look at a guy like Bryce Dees. They've got a freshman coming in, Shadarius Tootle, who's a good player. So, I think the ceiling is maybe a bit higher than people expect, but I don't think the floor is super low. Deshaun Womack was first at LSU, then Ole Miss, and now Auburn. He's trying to find his way. He's a guy that you hope can take that step forward, but it's a little bit unknown. Cody Sigler from USF, I think, if my memory serves me right. He's a really, really good player. He's going to surprise a lot of people, I think, who don't know who he is. He's a stud. Malik Autry's not a bad player either. I think their defensive line is going to surprise some people. Walter Mathis Jr. was a really highly recruited guy. I ended up picking LSU over, I think he might have actually picked Florida State, but it was a really, really contentious recruiting battle. Texas was involved, LSU was involved, Florida State was involved, Georgia was involved for a little bit. So that's a really talented guy. So their defensive line is going to be talented. It's just not a lot of experience outside of Cody Sigler. So that kind of brings me to, what does Durkin want to do? And he's one of the more creative coordinators you'll see because they do a lot of different stuff. They'll play cover one, they'll play some cover three, they'll bring seven, and play blitz coverage or what people know as cover zero. They'll play some quarters in there, and then they'll play some cover two. They'll play some non-traditional Tampa two coverages. So, they're a little bit of kind of what the SEC is defensively nowadays, which is just to say they're a little bit of a smorgasbord, a little bit of a they kind of do everything type of defense. They're not going to just do one thing and live in that the way that, someone like Texas did. They change up week to week what they're trying to be depending on, what they're getting from an offensive perspective. And I think that's what, makes a guy like DJ Durkin really, really valuable. And so they're going to be good defensively. I don't know if they're going to be as good as last year defensively because they did have some really good cornerbacks, and they had cornerbacks that are now starting for other SEC programs and good SEC programs. They had a secondary that was strong. Their linebackers were tremendous, and they lost Robert Woodyard. He is now at Missouri, and he was an absolute stud. He was a guy that, quite frankly, I thought was better than a lot of guys that other SEC programs took in the portal. But still, they're super talented, though they should be good defensively.
Yeah, you said Dallas Walker. You were asking was a part of the 22 class at A&M.
Mhm.
He was part of the 2020 class, so
Okay.
2 years earlier. Yeah, but
Okay, so
yeah,
no, go
that's
ahead.
all we can go with the schedule.
Whoops. We might have spoiled a little bit, but
Yeah. All
so
right.
we can start with week one. For those who don't remember, last year they played, I think, at Baylor.
They played
Um,
at Baylor. Yes.
Yeah, and Auburn won that game where Jackson Arnold might have run for like 200 yards, it felt like. Baylor could not stop the run. They couldn't really stop the pass either. Auburn ended up winning that game. This one is now the return game of that. It's not held in Jordan Hare. It's going to be held in, I think, in the Mercedes Benz. And
Yeah.
we both have we both have Auburn winning. Just to be blunt about it, I think this is another one of those games where DJ Lagway could throw 3 or 4 interceptions, and that was really the main motivation for me picking Auburn. I think DJ Durkin is going to do a really good job with DJ Lagway, and DJ Lagway has done very little to inspire any level of confidence in me. And then the other thing I would say is Dave Aranda really struggled last year with running quarterbacks, and one of the things that I persistently noticed with him is there was a real stubbornness to get out of too high when they were facing running quarterbacks. When you saw the Auburn game last year, they were getting gashed and they were staying in quarters or they were staying in cover two. They would not bump down to single high and get into man or play some version of cover three. And that created a lot of problems for them last year in this game. We'll see if he adjusts. I don't know that he will. And so I'm going to take Auburn to win.
Yeah. Kind of similar to what you said. The biggest problem for me with Baylor was that not only DJ Lagway, because Lagway went from last year being a preseason possible Heisman candidate to being one of the worst quarterbacks in the SEC. And
Mhm.
um, I don't think he's going to be like as bad as he was against LSU in this game, but I think Auburn's a more talented team. I think that Baylor they don't have much production returning their leading receiver or the receiver coming back that had the highest total last year only had 400 yards with Gavin Freeman. Um, I don't think it's going to be like a blowout, but I think that it's just going to be too much for Baylor. And also, I want to add that it seems like anytime we see the SEC play any other conference in Mercedes Benz, the SEC always comes out on top. So I'm going to go with Auburn win this game, and I'm probably going to go 35-21 type of game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So then week two, Southern Miss. We're not going to talk very much about this game.
Yeah.
We both have them winning. And then next week they play Florida. Uh, this is going to be a really, really fun game because it is at home and it's at night. Two new regimes and two new coaching staffs, and some guys from Auburn that are now at Florida. I'm thinking of guys like Eric Singleton. Just because it is at home, first game, first SEC game at home for Alex Golish at Jordan Hare. I do think that's going to tip the scales in that favor. And that's really the main reason. The fact that it is going to be Summerall's first experience on the road in the SEC at night in a place that, a lot of people says has voodoo magic. That's going to make me take Auburn in this game.
Yeah, I agree with you on a lot of those points. And weirdly, I think this could be. It seems like every year in the SEC, when you have two teams that are like similar level of talent and like pretty brand new teams or coaching staffs, even though they're pretty close to talent, it seems like some of those games, it seems like at least one of those games every year ends up turning out to be a blowout. I
Hmm.
feel like this could possibly be one of those games. I think that, and to be completely honest, I think Auburn is the more talented team offensively, at least. Uh, and I think with it being at night and Jordan Hare, you don't have the quarterbacks like Jackson Arnold, Peyton Thorne, or any of those quarterbacks anymore. But I think that Auburn's going to end up coming out on top. Just like you said, first SEC home game, first SEC road game for one of them. So yeah,
Yeah, so then we both have them at now 4-0, and then I have them beating Vanderbilt. Clint has them beating Vanderbilt. We've talked about it in the past. If we're going to be wrong about Vanderbilt, if it's going to have to happen again, I'm not going to. If I'm going to be wrong about Vanderbilt, it's because I said they're not going to be very good. I just don't trust freshman quarterbacks in the SEC. Jared Curtis is really talented, but he played pretty awful competition in high school, and he got away with some stuff from what he was doing from a mechanic standpoint. He's just playing backyard football that you just can't do in the SEC. I think there's going to be a growth curve there. So especially early in the year, I'm going to I would sell stock on Vanderbilt.
yeah, it's a lot of what you just said with the freshman quarterback. And personally, me, and I'm fine with being wrong in this prediction. I don't think Curtis is going to be that great. That's just my prediction. I think a lot of times when players go from playing high school competition, I mean, it's like how people talk about Wilt Chamberlain playing plumbers and
Hmm.
mechanics back then. It's just I don't know how you go from playing that level to playing against the most talented guys in the country. So I don't see it working out good for them, and you'll see that in more episodes. But I have Auburn winning this pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, going from playing Timmy's and Tyler's to 5 stars is not the easiest transition. So then the next week we have them going to Tennessee. We both have this being a loss. Uh, Part of this stems from the fact for me, any time that someone from a coaching tree plays the head of the tree, you typically see the head of the tree win the first couple times. If you think about literally anyone against Nick Saban, and then you think about Dan Lanning against Kirby Smart, you think about um, Urban Meyer and the guys he ended up mentoring and then became head coaches when they played him. Uh, the head of the tree tends to typically win because they know the scheme that the other team is running. They're typically the originators of it, so they've got information that they can feed into their defensive coordinator. Neyland's one of the hardest places to play. They don't lose at home to pretty much anyone that isn't Georgia or one of those teams. So even though I have a lot of questions about Tennessee, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and especially at quarterback, I will take them to win this game. You're muted, by the way.
Second time. Um, I said you pretty much said everything I was going to say. I could just go and ramble on, but there's no point for me to do that. So,
Yeah. So
all right.
then the bye week, can't make a prediction there. So then we've got them playing at Georgia. This one's going to be pretty simple for me. Auburn, when they play Georgia at Jordan-Hare, it tends to be a really close game. When they play Georgia in Athens between the hedges, it tends to be a blowout. These games don't tend to be close when they're not played at Jordan-Hare, and I think Georgia's going to be really good again. And then Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann against the Veer and Shoot outside of last year with Josh Heupel has had a lot of success. They still haven't lost to one of those schools. When Golish was at Tennessee, they were really good at stopping the offense. So for me, pretty simple. I'm gonna take Georgia to win for a lot of reasons. Uh, the probably the biggest reason being Kirby Smart's track record against this offense.
Yeah, the moment I saw this game, I just thought that it was just going to be a blowout. I think Auburn's talented. I do. I think their schedule is really hard for them, but I just and a first year head coach, and I know I'm probably gonna say this a lot, but it's just I don't know how I can think he's gonna compete or even win a game on the road at Georgia when the only team that Georgia ever loses to really in the SEC in general is Alabama. So
Yeah,
um,
just one
yeah,
thing. So I mentioned the games typically end up being blowouts when they're in Athens. The last four times these teams have played, the average margin of victory for Georgia when they play in Athens against Auburn is 22 points. So
jeez,
when it's played between the hedges, they win by 3 touchdowns. I think that was probably all we needed to say there.
yeah,
So then another really tough game for them. This time it's going to be at home. It's and really the tough part for them for me is it's the fact that it's not at night. They have to play at 11 a.m. Central Time against an LSU team that, to me, I think they're going to upwards ascend towards the later part of the year, especially with how young their defensive line is probably going to end up being. I think what you're going to see from them is they may struggle early in the year, but by late October, when Deuce Gerald's, Lamar Brown, Richard Anderson, some of those guys get a little bit more snaps under them, you're going to see them take really big steps forward. And because of that, I think they're going to be a lot harder team to play late in the year. And when you take that into account, the fact that they don't get to play this game late at night where they can feed off the crowd, they don't get any level of talent advantage either. I don't think there's a coaching advantage either for them. To me, this is an LSU win.
yeah. I think the game will be close. I don't think it's gonna be a blowout like the Georgia game. Just because it seems like every time these teams play each other, it ends up being a decently close game from my recent memory. It's just the problem is, it's just, and despite me not being the biggest Sam Levitt fan in the world, it's just, I think LSU is just a very talented team. They're going to be very good this year. And like you said, they're probably going to end up peaking towards the back half of the season, which at this point you're starting to get really deep into that back half. Uh,
Mhm.
Pretty much, yeah, this and one more game for November. So I think that it'll be a close game. I think it might be like a 21-18 type of score, but I just think LSU is too talented to lose this game.
Yeah, going back to the point you talked about with the really close games, in the past 8 years that they played, so from 2016 to 2023, when they were both in the SEC West, there was a singular game that was there was two games that were blowouts, a 2000 game or 2020 and then 2023. Every other game was a single possession game. In fact, if you exclude those 2 years, the largest average margin of victory was 5 points. So this game does really tend to be really, really close. So the losing streak for both of us continues, and the more and more you look at the schedule, the more and more you think Auburn got a really, really tough shake of the draw. Um, Having to play Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss within a 3 week stretch is not easy, especially when you have to go to Neyland before you play Georgia. Um, I think again, Ole Miss is going to have Ole Miss is more talented than them. I think DJ Durkin's a really good defensive coordinator, but I don't think they're going to be able to stop Trinidad Chambliss. I don't think they're going to be able to stop Keywan Lacey. I think, especially with Ole Miss, where they're going to have scheme continuity on the offensive side of the ball. And then I think they're going to be one of the 10 best defenses in the country next year because they did a tremendous job in the portal in terms of filling needs. I think Ole Miss is going to be, really, really damn good. And so I have this as a loss.
Yeah, I we'll get to it eventually, but I have Ole Miss being one of the top teams in the conference and honestly the country, in my opinion. I think that they're going to be a really damn good team. And even though you have a first full season head coach, I think having Trinidad and Keywan Lacey back, that alone is huge in itself. And they also bring some good pieces back, a wide receiver, and I'm correct me if I'm wrong. I think they bring back a lot of their defense.
Yeah, they
So
bring back most of the pieces that they really, really wanted back.
yeah, and although yes, it was a playoff, and you were still running the same offense you ran the whole entire season, and it was not too much of a, I wouldn't say difficult job like head coaching wise, but you didn't like it wasn't something like brand new you had to install real quick. So I think it's gonna be interesting to see how um, Pete Golding does in his first full year as a head coach. But if they end up being how I think they're going to be, I think this could end up being like a 45-24 game for Ole Miss.
Yeah. So the next week, this is when Auburn finally gets back on track. Both have them beating Arkansas. We talked about Arkansas 2 weeks ago. You can check out our episode there. We probably have a more detailed preview about that game. I'll be pretty brief with this one. They're just more talented, and it's at home.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more I can say about it. It's kind of like how, and this is like it isn't any disrespect to Arkansas because I actually don't have them as my worst team this year, but I just it's kind of like whenever you see a team like Ohio State go or play UCLA at home or play Rutgers at home, like it's
Yeah.
and Auburn's not obviously on that level, but I just think that Auburn is a lot more talented and they're going to be a lot more well coached, in my opinion.
Yeah. So then Mississippi State. I think this is a sneaky, really close game. Mississippi State last year was in a lot of really, really close games. Their quarterback this year is going to be Camario Taylor, and he lit it up at the Manning Passing Academy. We had a few people that we knew that were there and talking to them. They spoke really, really highly about him. The ball comes out a little bit different when he's throwing it. There's just more life. He's a tremendous athlete. He's got great contact balance. He's a little bit tighter mechanically than maybe you'd think, especially given his size. So this is going to be a really tough game for Auburn, especially with how good Kamario Taylor could end up being. But it just goes back to it's just again like with a lot of these SEC games, especially if it's in the daytime, it's hard for the team that's more talented to lose a lot of the time, especially when there's a pretty there's a pretty steep gap there. Like Mississippi State's not a bad team, but they're still pretty small in the defensive line. They're not able to two gap the way that they really want to, and you saw that be a problem for them last year, where they could not really stop the run. And if you can't stop the run against a veer and shoot team, you're going to be in trouble. And I don't know that they're at the point yet with their defensive line where they are going to be able to stop the run.
Yeah, you made the great point with the inability to stop a run versus veer and shoot. If their defense is anything like last year, which nothing has shown me that I should believe that it is any better or it is going to be much improved, Mississippi State's going to have to win a shootout. Now, in my personal opinion, I think Kamaro Taylor is a better quarterback than Blake Shapen is. I think he's going to do a much better job. But I just after seeing what happened last year with Jeff Lebby, it's kind of like in 2021, if you remember Texas, how like they had leads at like almost every single game,
Yeah.
but just at the very end, they would just blow the game. And it kind of reminds me of that. And I think Mississippi State will be better this year, but I think, and especially with it being at Mississippi State, it's going to be a closer game. But I think Auburn will pull away at the end.
Yeah, I'm with you. So then next week, Samford, we're not even going to talk about it. It's a win. And then the last week at Alabama, this is really similar to the to the Deep South's oldest rivalry, Georgia Auburn. When it's at Jordan Air, these games are awesome. They're really, really competitive. And when they're not, they're almost never competitive. You look at the last like 7 games that they played in Tuscaloosa. Alabama's won by 14, 22, 29, 31, 18, 11, and then 49. And the last time that Auburn won in Tuscaloosa was the Cam Newton year in 2010. And since then, they haven't played a game that has even been close. So that kind of goes to what this rivalry is. When it's in one place, it's a good game. When it's in the other, it's not even watchable at certain points, and nothing's going to make me change my mind here. Maybe when we get later in the year and you can see Auburn and we get some film on them, maybe my perspective will change. But based off of what we know right now, there's not a whole lot to make me believe that Auburn's going to go into Tuscaloosa and win.
Yeah, there's a rule I have with this matchup every single year when predicting. It's if it's at Auburn, I will pick Auburn. If it's at Alabama, I'll pick Alabama.
Yeah.
Just because no matter when it's at Auburn, no matter how bad Auburn is and how good Alabama is, it's it's always going to be a close game no matter what. And in the inverse, I think, which obviously like with Nick Saban being there as long as he was, not a lot of people that like are like our age at least have ever seen a Auburn team play an Alabama team where Auburn was a better team.
Yeah.
So yeah, for until that changes, I'm going to be going Alabama. So we have them ending at 7-5, improving from last year where they missed a bowl game. I think they went 5-7 last year, so that's a
Yep.
two game improvement. Which obviously, if you're a fan, no matter what, you'll be happy about an improvement. So um,
Yeah, I think, this is a good team. I think it's if they had an easier schedule, this is a team that maybe goes 9-3. It's just you have to play Tennessee, Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, LSU. That's 5 teams in the SEC that realistically are trying to be playoff contenders. That's I mean, it doesn't get much harder than that, really. And that's kind of the big problem for them is it doesn't even matter that we think they're talented. It's they're playing the most talented teams in the conference, and the really big problem for them is the fact that they're going to have to play some of these games not at home at night where you really see them feed off that crowd.
yeah, they just unfortunately have a really brutal schedule, especially towards that middle part where we have them getting 4 straight losses. You have in that span, I think it was Georgia, Ole Miss. Um, can't remember the other
LSU,
two.
Tennessee, and then they get the
Yeah,
2 weeks off.
yeah. All right. So that was our Auburn preview. Now we're going to be moving on to Florida. With Florida, the description is decent, but I think with Buster Faulkner, who's their OC, it's you're gonna have to get a little bit more into spread option because it's really a hybrid offense where
Mhm.
his roots are going to go back to air raid. He did learn under guys like Hal Mume and Chris Hatcher, so he does have some air raid principles in his offense. But the scheme's really going to rely on spread principles, a lot of heavy pre-snap motion, and a very physical run game too, kind of like what Joel Gordon and Alex Golish had. Some of
Yeah,
the key points. Sorry, did you want to say something?
yeah, I was gonna add one thing when you're talking it's a little bit like the power spread. If you remember how Todd Monken was, it's a lot like that, except it's like basically you take pro style offense, you take power run game, you take the spread, you mash it up, and that's what you get with Buster Faulkner.
Yeah. So just a couple points out of 4 points on just a couple characteristics of his offense. First point, you're going to have a versatile personnel formations. He's going to he's going to use a lot of different personnel groupings. He'll use a lot of empty backfields. He'll do a lot of bunch and overload sets to stretch defenses, force pre-snap adjustments, and also just to keep the defense honest because with Alex Goals, for example, if you're going to be running almost all your plays with wide splits, they at some point can truly adapt to it and they can figure out how to combat what you're doing. But when you're really diverse in everything you do, it makes the defensive coordinator and the other team really have to think and really think about what type of personnel and what type of guys he wants out there. Second point is going to be he will do a lot of RPO and quarterback run game. Kind of, it's kind of like what you saw with South Florida with Byron Brown. But Buster Faulkner, you guys watched him last year at Georgia Tech. They did a lot of that with Haynes King. I mean, if you watched any Georgia Tech game last year, you saw a lot of him running. If and especially games like the Florida State game in 2024, the Georgia game in 2024, just both those games in general, they did a lot of running with the quarterback. Um, the running concepts are going to be a lot of inside zone, wide zones, split zones, and just stuff like that. Third point's going to.
No,
You
go
want to
ahead.
say something? Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say you're pretty much gonna get everything. Like Faulkner really is an amalgamation of a lot of different guys. You mentioned some of the air raid and some of the spread guys he learned from. He learned a ton from Todd Monken as well. There's a lot of different stuff that's going on there.
Yeah, and also, I mean, he learned at Georgia in 2020
Mhm.
to 2022, which I think Mike Bobo was there at the time. Was he?
Yeah, one of those years was Bobo. The other one was Monken.
Okay, so I mean, you learn from both those guys, and I mean, he learned from a lot of different people. Which with the hybrid that he has, it's a great list of names.
Hmm.
Third point, complexity without simplicity. It's pretty much I don't know why I titled it that. It's just that's pretty much just all the shifts and motions that he's going to do just to force the defense to tip its hand. And then the fourth point is going to be the spacing and tempo. Um, a lot of that spacing and tempo is going to be based in the screen game, where he's going to have a very quick tempo at times, where they're going to be very quick passes, a lot of it even screen passes. And the point is just to get the ball to those playmakers quick and allow them to make plays. So he does a lot of times also like to. I'm trying to find a way to say this. He wants to he wants to force a defense to out talent them, I guess, in a sense. I guess that's a way to say it. But other than that, I don't really have too many points regarding this offense. Going to the players, you have Aaron Philo, who he was at Georgia Tech last year, and then you have Tramel Jones coming in, that freshman who there's a lot of potential with him, a lot of upside. There are a good amount of people that are high on him.
Yeah.
You have Jaden Ball returning, who was a workhorse last year. He was an amazing back. He tried his hand in the portal for a bit, but ended up coming back. One guy I think is going to be very underrated for this offense that I think will make more of an impact than people are going to give him credit for is I think Evan Pryor, who's a transfer running back from Cincinnati. Uh, he was our third leading rusher, tied about 500 yards last year, and there were some times where he looked really damn good throughout the year. And then with the receivers, you actually have out of these 7 receivers here, you have 5 guys who last year tallied 200 plus receiving yards. So you have a lot of production coming onto your roster. The only guy who didn't get 200 plus was Dallas Wilson, but I'm pretty sure he was injured throughout most of the year, if I remember correctly. So
Mhm.
he would have gotten that no matter what. But you have Eric Singleton coming over from Auburn, who was the second leading receiver um, behind Cam Coleman. I believe he was
Yep.
second. Yeah, and then you have Vernell Brown coming back. You have Micah Mays from Wake Forest, who had about 300 yards. And then you have Bailey Stockton, who coming from Georgia Tech also. So you have a lot of good guys in that group, and TJ Abrams, sophomore. But I'm not worried about skill positions. I'm curious to see how the O line does, though. You have 2 transfers: Harrison Moore from Georgia Tech, and you have TJ Shanahan, who was at A&M and M and Penn State for a bit, and then 2 guys returning. You do have a lot of experience on this O line, though, with only 1 sophomore. The rest are upperclassmen. So you will have a good amount of experience in some parts. It's just when you get to the tight end room, that's where start to probably worry a bit because I don't think you have much experience there at all. Luke Harpering, he played a little bit for Georgia Tech last year, but not much at all. And then Aaron Philo, he was behind Haynes King for the whole year. So it's a lot of unknown, especially with the quarterback. So I think how he does in the SEC will be interesting, and just see what type of player he is. And yeah, especially with him never starting or never being a starter, it's those situations are always kind of iffy.
Yeah, so I'll add in a few notes that I think you addressed on. I think this is going to be one of the three best wide receiving rooms in the conference. Them, Texas, and whoever the third is. It's probably one of the best ones in the entire country, especially if Dallas Wilson can stay healthy. Eric Singleton, when he was with Buster Faulkner at Georgia Tech, was really, really dynamic, really hard to play against, especially with all the eye candy that Faulkner uses. You talk to coaches across the country, and Faulkner is considered one of the 5 best offensive minds in the entire sport, in the entire country. I mean, in terms of college. And he's a guy that really knows how to scheme stuff up. They do a really good job of executing at a high level too. And then the last thing I'll touch on is just Aaron Philo. He hasn't played a lot, but you talk to guys around Buster Faulkner, you talk to guys around Georgia Tech, and they'll tell you that last year, Buster Faulkner did push for Aaron Philo to be the starter. So there is some level of, that the guy that they wanted was actually Faulkner. So something to, or the guy they wanted to start was Philo, but Brent Key wanted Haynes King as the leader of his program. So that kind of played a role there, and that's something to just remember and take into account. So I think they're going to be really talented offensively. It's a good point with the offensive line, and especially the tight ends, because they've got a tight end who's like 300 pounds and Hezi Kent, who really should move to tackle because he's not going to play very long at tight end if he wants to be there. But that's another conversation and a different talking point. But Clint, if you don't have anything else, I can talk about the defense, and then we can jump on over to the schedule.
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. So talking about the defense, this is Brad White. It says a 3-4, and in a lot of ways that is true. It is when you think of a 3-4, really you want to think about it being an odd front structure. And when we say odd front structure, we're talking about a zero tech nose and then 2 4 eyes or 2 heavy 4s to close up those B gaps. That's what they're going to do a lot of. Brad White at Kentucky, he ran a lot of mid front. So mid front is a zero technique and then 2 4 eyes and then a jack who is typically aligned away from the passing strength. So the side with the least number of receivers. So that's they do use a lot of them in front, and even when they're in 4 down, you'll see them stunt a lot. You'll see them run simulated pressures or creepers to get into odd spacing. So they'll slant guys to get them into the zero nose and then the 2 4 eyes where they're closing the B gaps. You'll see them do that. quite a bit. And then, they'll from a coverage menu standpoint, they're very much like every other SEC team. They'll play a lot of quarters, they'll play some cover one, and then they'll play a lot of cover three. And when they play cover three, it's a lot more of the match variation. So we're talking a little bit more like Ripley's match or Gone match from the Aranda tree. That's what they tend to use a little bit more of than the Ripley's stuff. So that's something to remember is they had Ron Roberts last year, and now they have Brad White. There's some carryover. There's not going to be as many simulated pressures or creepers as what Roberts did. They're not going to be nearly as deep or as comprehensive from a coverage menu, and they're not going to be as good as attacking protections. In a lot of ways, they kind of downgraded in terms of who they have as a defensive coordinator from a scheme standpoint. But Brad White has gotten really good defenses in the past, so that's something to keep in mind. The front seven is going to be awesome. Miles Graham, Jaden Robinson, Aaron Childs, really, really good football players. Really, really good football players. Um, Jaden Woods had a good freshman year. I don't know that I would say it was a great freshman year. I think when you watch his tape, you don't come away super impressed. You come away impressed, but you don't come away thinking he's a game wrecker. So he'll need to take some steps forward. Really, the guy that I have my eye on is LJ McCray. He's a former 5-star. If he takes that step forward, if he can stay healthy, I think this is going to be one of the three best defensive lines in the country because they're really, really deep. Jeremiah McLeod, Brendan Bedd, Joseph Mbachu, Cameron James, really good run setters, and they just need a little bit of pass rushing. From a secondary standpoint, Cormani McLean had some good moments last year. Has to get a lot more consistent. Needs to really add some weight to the frame. That's really the big thing for me. Bryce Thornton was a really good player. Drake Stubbs didn't play a lot, but he's solid. Ben Hanks, as he's now going to head into his true sophomore season or his retro freshman season. Last year he struggled a little bit, but he's one of those guys who really the struggles came from a lack of physicality, not from a technique standpoint. He's pretty solid from a technique standpoint. He's gonna have to get a lot stronger. That's the big thing. Dijon Johnson, when he did play, was really good, and then uh, Kanye Clark and DJ Coleman are both transfers that I'm gonna have to see to believe it. I really liked Alfonso Allen last year. I thought he was really, really strong in the run game. So all in all, even a guy like Javari Flowers had some really good moments. They've got Lagonza Hayward. He'll play. He'll play a lot, and he'll be really good for them. So, they've got talent in the secondary, but there's still a lot of guys that have to develop and have to take that step forward for them to really reach their ceiling defensively.
Yeah, that was a great breakdown, and I'm ready to get into the schedule. Um,
Okay.
let's get this back to one. So, okay, we don't spoil everything.
Yep.
All right.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So,
Okay.
starting with Florida right here. First game, we're not going to talk much about this. Unless the team's really bad, we're not going to talk about, unless it's like Kentucky or Mississippi State, we're not going to talk about them. Campbell, easy win. Going to a game that we talked about earlier, going to Auburn.
Yeah. So, yeah, we don't need to just go
Yeah.
when you're watching this, go back 30 minutes and we gave a full breakdown of this game. We're not going to do that again. We both have them losing on the road, going to 2-1, and then against Ole Miss, We both have them winning. We've talked about how we think Ole Miss is going to be really good, but this is again, it's similar to what we were talking about with Golish and it being the first home game in the conference. This is the first home game for John Summerall in Gainesville. I think that's going to play a huge factor. I think the crowd's going to be really, really into it. And this is going to be Pete Golding's first SEC road game as head coach. That makes me nervous for them, and that is why I'm going to take Florida to win.
Yeah. You see with the time slot, it's the possibility of it being a night kickoff too. So not only is it at Florida and it favors Buster Faulkner and the Florida Gators, and you have a possibility of it being a night game too, which a night game in the swamp and this holds for me no matter how good Florida is or how bad. It's never going to be an easy game there ever. It's a very good environment, and you have a Florida team, which what we talked about earlier has probably a top three, possibly top two wide receiver core in the SEC, and you can even think top 10 nationally, possibly. So they're going to be very talented on offense. And although I think Ole Miss is very good and I think has a possibility to maybe be on top of the SEC at the end of this year, I think that no team's going to go undefeated in this conference, and I think that Florida is going to come out with a win here.
Yeah. So then Missouri, I've got them winning this game. The reason why I have them winning this game is one, um, I don't know that Ahmad Hardy is going to be able to play, and that really is a big deal for me. Where Jamal Roberts is a really good player, but if they don't have their lead back, I think that limits what they're trying to do from an offensive standpoint. Because I don't think Austin Simmons is a good enough player to win without having that level of run game. So to me, if Ahmad Hardy was healthy, I think this game would be a lot more hard for me to pick. But without him being healthy and me not thinking he's going to be healthy for this game, that's why I'm going to take. That's why I'm taking Florida to win.
So the reason why I had them losing this game is, and I started to think about it more, and I probably should have picked Florida to win, but the reason why I picked Florida to lose is because I think that Austin Simmons, even though he got benched in the middle of the season last year, I think he's still a good quarterback. I think he has a lot to bring to an offense, and I think that Eli Drinkwitz is a coach who's always going to do just enough. He's never going to do anything that's going to get you competing for a championship, but he's also never going to do too little to where you're missing a bowl game or to where your team is like right on 500. They're always like an 8-4 team. So with their schedule, I had Missouri taking a lot more losses, and I just kind of stuck by that rule. And I think Missouri will actually be a decent team next year, but I think with Florida, I think it's going to be another game for them to get used to be on the road. And I genuinely don't know about Philo. And even though you said Faulkner went in to start, I haven't seen really much of him play at all. So I think Missouri will win this game, but also part of me thinks they're not going to.
Yes, then South Carolina. I think South Carolina is going to be pretty bad this year. I don't really believe a lot in the roster, and the big thing for me that and the big problem that I have with them is both of their offensive linemen that they got in the transfer portal, Peak, and then I can't remember the other one's name, but a really good player. Neither one of them is going to be available in this game, and if they're not going to be able to protect Lenora Sellers, it kind of feels like it's going to be the exact same thing as it was last year for them. And last year, because they didn't change a whole lot in terms of who they are at running back or who they are in terms of the receiver room. If it's the same exact thing as it was last year, and you can't keep Lenora Sellers upright, you're not going to have very much success in this conference. Uh, and I don't think either one of them are going to be healthy by the time that they're playing in this game. So I'm going to pick Florida to win, especially because it is at home.
Yeah, I just the biggest thing like I see here with South Carolina is what you said. It's the O line because last year I mean, Sellers was in the same boat as Lagway, where they were like super highly touted in the preseason, and it just didn't end up coming to fruition. For
Hmm.
for Sellers' situation more so. Granted, yes, a lot of it did have to do with just poor play by Sellers, but also a lot of it had to do with how bad their O line was. I mean, it seemed like every three plays, Lenoris was fighting for his life to stay up and just get the ball away. It was hard for them to produce any type of passing game whatsoever because he just had no time in the pocket. You would see a lot of plays where instantly, and part of this was him just what's called was Sellers just not.
Just running around,
Yeah, it
basically.
was just him just running around. But a lot of it was based on what happened. So it's unfortunate for them, but yeah, I think South Carolina's going to lose this game. All right.
Yeah, so then we both have them losing to Texas. For those who, I'll just give a very brief reason why. I think Texas is going to be one of the 3 or 4 most talented teams in the country, and this being in Austin makes me think that, this is gonna be a win for
Yeah,
them.
I have Texas winning this game.
So then the bye week, and then they play Georgia. This is a sleeper game for me where I could really see Summerall winning this game. I think he's got I think the thing that really has troubled Florida with Georgia in the past is Florida's played some really undisciplined football and they really haven't made the plays when they needed to. Right? You think about DJ Lagway underthrowing that ball to Sturvenand, which should have been a touchdown, really, and it ends up being not a catch because of that. You talk about them not being able to get off the field on third down and giving up a first down on 3rd and 7 when they get truck toss into the boundary. Um, Stuff like that. I think they might be able to clean that up, but still, I think that won't happen this year for them. I think Georgia's more talented than them. I think Georgia's going to be one of the 3 best teams in the SEC, and so I'm taking Georgia.
Yeah, I unless Aaron Philo and um, trying to remember who the tight end was. Unless they just end up,
Amir Jackson,
yeah, unless they just end up being Kyle Trask and what's his name,
Kyle
Kyle
Pitts.
Pitts. Yeah, I don't think Florida's going to win this game.
So the next week, Oklahoma. This could be at night, so it could get interesting. But man, having to face Brent Venables when he's got, you know, now 8 games of film on you is not a fun experience, especially when it's the first time. Faulkner hasn't seen Venables before, and almost always the first time that you see Venables, it doesn't go very well for you. There's very few coaches that have success immediately with him, and especially as a quarterback, it's just the stuff he throws at you is really, really hard to deal with. That's why for me, Oklahoma is going to win.
Yeah, this was a game that I possibly thought about making an upset just because you have the possibility of a night game in the swamp. You have Oklahoma coming in, who I feel like Oklahoma could be a team that slips up a time or two. It's just
Mhm.
I think that Oklahoma's too talented. They're going to have one of the best defenses in the country this year. You could argue possibly the best in the SEC. I haven't really looked too deep into the defensive depth charts, but yeah, I have Florida losing to Oklahoma.
Yes, and the next week, playing Kentucky on the road, I still think this is a win. Kentucky, I think they're going to have a really bright future with Will Stein, but I don't think year one they're talented enough, and that's really the big thing for me is, like we talked about, in order for coaching to matter, in order for home field to matter, I think there has to be a big enough I think there has to be a small enough talent discrepancy, and that's not the case here.
Yeah, even though I think it'll be a close game. Just it being a night game in Lexington, and for some reason they have some weird voodoo magic once a year too. And I agree with your point. I think Wilson will be an amazing coach. It's just I think year one you're kind of in a little bit of a crappy situation. I think that Florida will come away.
Yes, then Vanderbilt, we talked about it already
Yeah,
when we talked about, for Auburn. We're just not big believers in Curtis yet, and this is in Gainesville. This is not a game they should lose. And then Florida State, I think it's as simple as I think Mike Norvell is a dead man walking.
yeah,
I don't see them winning this game. I think it's more likely he gets fired than they win this game. So that brings me to 8-4, Clint to 7-5. We're both kind of in that, they're a mid-level to upper mid-level SEC team. I think the thing it's similar to Auburn for me where I think Florida is really, really talented. I think they're one of the 20, maybe even 15 most talented teams in the country. But they play Texas, Georgia, Ole Miss, all, and then they have to go on the road to Jordan Hare. That is a really, really tough
yeah.
schedule,
It's not
and
easy at all.
yeah, and again, it's a head coach who has not been in the SEC in a few years, and it's hard to imagine a guy who hasn't been in the SEC in a while having a lot of success and being ready for that. Whereas, like you look at guys who've had immediate success, like Steve Sarkisian, when he'd been a head coach for a really long time, but he'd been at Texas before, and he had been with Nick Saban for 3 years in total, so he had more experience. That's not the case here, and so that's why I have I'm a little bit lower on them in terms of them being maybe a playoff contender.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're a very talented team. I just think that with the schedule they're being dealt, the situation that they're in, um, I think they're a 7-5 team. I think that if they had like Alabama's schedule, for example, I think they could easily be possibly creeping up to 10 wins. It's just this conference. It's a lot of just what schedule you're drawing because you could be a super talented team, but if you have a bad draw, you could lose 3 games and still be one of the top 5 talented teams in the country. It's just that's how it is in this conference.
Yeah, so that's gonna wrap it up for us. Thank you guys for being here. Next week we're talking Kentucky and Georgia. Please like, subscribe, comment, retweet, follow Ghost at 40 Acre Vibes, follow Clint at Clint J Barrows, follow me at Coach Pack _. We really appreciate you guys being here. Again, next week we're talking Kentucky and then we're talking Georgia. Same thing as this week. We're going to break down their roster. We're going to break down their offensive and defensive scheme, and then we'll predict their schedule. Thank you guys for being here. Have a great Thursday.